I came from a completely different angle. I wanted to use my abilities as a magician to see if the evidence that was being captured on these paranormal TV shows was genuine or fraudulent. That's the reason that's another reason I went into this. The whole revelation from my father was one reason, but another reason was, as a magician, I wanted to see if these guys were faking all of this stuff. So when I went out in the field and I duplicated what they were doing, which is what magicians do, we try to duplicate to see if we can get the same evidence. I was duplicating it and I was getting the evidence. However, bing, 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 this evidence wasn't fake. This evidence was real.
Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics, coming at you from a coffee shop somewhere in Kiev, Ukraine. Hopefully there's not too many sounds of people talking in Russian behind me, but we'll see what we can do. But we have a very special guest today, which is Bobby Gallo. He is the author of Family Spirits, and he is a former magician turned paranormal researcher. Now, there's some interesting stuff about Bobby. I am not usually too connected to the world of ghost hunting. However, Bobby has found a way to really tie a lot of this in with the afterlife. In fact, when I was looking through his book, he actually mentions names like Stuart Hameroff and talks about subjects like near-death experiences, which I think is really important because we really need to be framing the ghost subject in a bit with the greater topic of life after death and exactly where the so-called paranormal stuff originates from. So I'm going to turn it over to Bobby now. Hey, Bobby, how's it going?
It's going great. How are you? It's great to see you in the Ukraine. I have to say, right now I'm a fan. So this is I'm coming from a certain perspective here. So, yeah, exactly what you just said is right on target. You see, the bottom line is, I knew this going into the paranormal studies that this all does tie together. Of course, we're looking for ghosts, and the reason we're looking for ghosts is because we're looking for evidence of the afterlife. So why wouldn't this tie all together? Unfortunately, as you were almost alluding to in your summation in the beginning, there's just so many people out in paranormal land that are doing the exact opposite. They're taking ghost hunting paranormal and they're just trying to attribute it to either organic causes or trying to debunk every single thing they find and not trying to find the links between ghosts and the afterlife. Are they the same things? Is it is our spirit that's hanging out here instead of moving on? This is what we're trying to find answers to.
And I actually see two problematic areas. So one is, okay, you have the skeptics who are so focused only on ghosts, and maybe they will concede like, okay, maybe this was a paranormal thing that happened, but it doesn't mean that that has anything to do with an afterlife. So they kind of like stuck in one gear. They won't go
Mhm.
past that. But another issue concerns the people who do attribute this to afterlife phenomena, but they misinterpret it as a result. And so they believe everybody who passes away is a discarnate spirit who's just, haunting us and going boo. And that this is our fate, our destiny when we cross over. So they don't look at the greater reality of what we call the spirit world. They're just focused on, if there's somebody spooking around a graveyard, then they infer, oh, this must be what the afterlife is like. Do you have any comments?
Well, it could be what the afterlife is like. Afterlife is like for some. Here's the thing. There's a lot of theories we have why hauntings take place, and what ghosts may be, what spirits may be, what the afterlife may be for certain people. Uh, One of those theories is residual hauntings, and basically that's where an event played out in a certain location that was so dramatic or tragic that the energy is literally absorbed into the surroundings and plays back kind of like a tape loop. And I always look at it as though, a lot of times, if I'm doing a lecture, I'll hold up a triangle, the same ones they use in music, and I'll strike the triangle, and I'll ask the audience, I'll say, well, count how many seconds it takes for the vibration to stop. And let's just say it takes 5 seconds. And they'll say, okay, the vibration stopped. I said, well, how do you know it stopped? On a quantum level, sometimes this vibration keeps going on and on and on and on. And that's what we may think is happening in a residual haunt situation. So a lot of paranormal skeptics, if you will say, well, it's not a ghost, it's not intelligent, it's just residual. And in some cases that may be true. There was a lot of cases where we thought that may have been the case. However, there are too many times out in the field when we are getting intelligent responses to experiments that we're performing, whether it be ITC devices or EVP, where that just couldn't be the case because they're actually responding to us. There's an intelligence behind it. Yeah, basically that's it.
And actually, I wanted to roll another idea past you because this is
Hmm.
always something that comes up in the ghost hunting field as much. Maybe it does, I don't know. But it concerns another theory as well, which is something that I call astral bleed through. And so, real quick, before we jump into that, are you familiar much with out of body experiences? I know you took a look at a couple of my books. Maybe you know
Hmm.
about how that works. Do you know? Are you familiar much with that subject?
Sure, sure. I've studied everything almost because I've been looking for answers for years. And I find a lot of parallels between that science and even psychic communication through mediums and psychics and whatnot, and what we do as ghost hunters. Unfortunately, everybody thinks they're these, well, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people think they are these separate subjects when in actuality, we're all trying to figure out the same thing or just find answers, if you will. But yes, is the short answer.
And so, as you know, I do out of body experiences. So, what's interesting from my perspective is that on quite a few occasions, I have literally been the ghost. So, I have left my body and, for example, spied on a roommate or left my house. I've been invisible or able to float around and able to find myself not able to interact with this world. It's like my hand goes through objects, just like the cliches, just like Patrick Swayze in Ghost. So I've been in that situation many times. So it's kind of like, it's funny because you're a ghost hunter, so you could say right now you're talking to a ghost because I've been there on
Hmm.
from
Hmm.
the ghost perspective before, right? And so that really makes me, for one thing, think about how that state of consciousness is not even inaccessible to us because if I've done it, I know many other people who have also done it. So that right there shows you that it's perfectly plausible that we could be contacting other people in that state of consciousness, potentially even people who are not crossed over, maybe even people who are alive here who have just left their bodies. Any thoughts about those concepts?
I definitely have thoughts on those concepts. Bottom line is, I am not an expert. I can only speak upon, when it comes to my experience. I've been doing this since the late 80s, early 90s. So, I've been doing this a very long time. My conclusion is mind, consciousness, spirit, ghost, essence. It's all a different terminology for the exact same thing. It's that intangible part of us that does go on or does astral project. It's there's a component to us that's responsible, I believe, for all of this phenomenon. I don't think any of these terms are terms for separate things. I think it's terms for the same thing. So I absolutely believe that when you astral project, that is the aspect of you that would be a ghost in somebody who has passed on.
And some of us in the metaphysical community, we attribute this to what we could almost say is a vibrational mismatch. So that if you're in one dimension and your physics is not lining up to the physics here, that's why somebody looks intangible. That's why somebody looks a bit see-through, for instance. And when
Hmm.
we look in pop culture, we see all those cliches about ghosts and spirits floating around or being like partially invisible and or wearing a white robe and all of these things, and yet there's some truth behind that because it's a bit like an error that's being caused because you have somebody in one dimension trying to poke into this dimension, but they're not fully matched to the frequency, I guess. Now, I want to then lead that into the idea of astral bleed through. So, as somebody who does astral projection, I have many times found myself in worlds that can be surprisingly similar to this one, and yet geographically, it's as if that they're matched up to a location here. So is it possible? Let me, in fact, let me just clarify this. Like for one time, I was living in Los Angeles. I was staying in the Culver City Hotel, which it's a very historical place, and some people say it's haunted, right? So I was in the Culver City Hotel because the house I was in was having some, I think I was having like a bug bombing done. And so I was sleeping in there. I began to go out of my body. I left my bed, and then I was on what we call the astral parallel version of the Culver City Hotel. And but I wasn't. I was as physical and as real as you and I are right now. So, but I'd been transported to this parallel version. So I went downstairs, and it was like film noir. It was all these 1920s, 1930s style outfits. There was a party going on, and like they all turned and looked at me because I was the odd one out. And I just kind of like materialized into their party, right? And
Hmm.
so this had me thinking, is it not possible that if there is something happening on the astral side, that it could not bleed into this world? And could it not be possible that you could, like, some of the things that we think of as residual hauntings because we see somebody walk by in a period costume, maybe it was somebody wearing a period costume on the other side, but we saw a glimpse of them between both dimensions. I know I'm saying a lot here, and I'm going breaking my own rules as an interviewer by hogging the microphone. I kind of want your perspectives about all that. I know, you just take it from whatever point made sense.
It basically all made sense, believe it or not, because I have personally had some of those experiences, uh, but basically in dreams where you have, a parallel counterpart to somewhere that you see in life, but it looks completely different in your dream. And every time you dream, it looks exactly the same. So you figure it must be there because it's incredibly detailed, and there's no way that I feel my mind can make it up. But on the subject of something being a residual haunt, uh, I believe that can absolutely be possible in many cases because there was one investigation we were doing where I was communicating with an ancient Catawba Indian, and I asked them. I was doing the pendulum at the time, which is a conduit method of communication, and I was doing the pendulum communication, and I asked them, and it was the only time I ever got this answer because normally I'm denied some of these answers when I'm on an investigation, which is a whole another subject. But I asked, do you see this location the way it used to be or the way it is today? And the answer actually was both. So I thought that was very revealing because I always wanted an answer to that question. So sometimes it's not a residual haunt, it's their reality. Whether they're creating that reality with their consciousness in this other dimension or whether or not I don't have all the answers to that. I just know that's the answer that I got at the time.
I mean, it is definitely a complicated area, but then we
Hmm.
have to look at kind of the dark side as well, because this is something every ghost hunter deals with, are these
Hmm.
entities. And sometimes this is a good repudiation for people who believe that there is no such thing as a negativity in worlds like this one, because some people will push
Wrong.
the idea, especially in the new age field,
Uh-huh.
say
Oh yeah.
there's no bad things when Hitler, goes to heaven and is in a, playing a flute in a cloud, and
Right.
is a painter again or whatever. Uh, so as somebody involved in this, do you have any theories about where these negative entities are residing, and have you had any bad experiences with negative entities?
We have absolutely, and believe it or not, I have a lot of negative experiences on battlefields, and that's what leads me to believe that they are earthbound spirits, um, because we've actually communicated with several entities that appeared to be those of fallen soldiers, some as early as the Revolutionary War, and we had some Class A EVPs. When I asked the soldier, I said, can we do anything to help you? And we got an EVP as clear as day, help me out of here. And apparently they're stuck. I don't know why. I mean, it's anyone's guess, but they're very negative, and a lot of times they don't want us there. They tell us to leave. One was a loyalist entity from the loyalist soldier, and when he found out that my wife was French, he got very angry. And I mean, it's just that kind of evidence that leads me to believe that this is all real.
So, what is it that you think causes the negative entity to stick in one place? Because for the most part, when people cross over, they don't seem. I mean, I wouldn't imagine somebody would willingly want to hang around the place that they died at. So, could it be like an
Hmm.
extreme disbelief in an afterlife, or
Hmm.
being stuck in a psychological condition? Because like nobody I know would fall victim of that. I don't think. I know I certainly.
Hmm. Hmm.
No, I don't think you would. So what? Why does this happen to people?
This is a really good question. I think a lot of it is what I described in the book, which I actually asked you your opinion on, and I think it has to do with belief factor. For instance, these entities that are hanging around old cemeteries, they're mostly they were mostly Protestants, and if you know anything about the old Protestant religions, their belief is they staunchly believe that you remain with your remains until Judgment Day, and you don't go anywhere until the second coming. That's what they believe. And that has been borne out so many times on investigations where we get absolutely no activity in modern day cemeteries. But if you go to a Victorian or earlier cemetery, all of a sudden the place lights up and they're all over the place. Why? Uh, we believe it may be because that is their belief system. That is where they believe they're supposed to be. So that they're pretty much just hanging around. In the case of a battlefield, I think there are a lot of entities roaming around that just don't know how to move on for one reason or another. And I think it was what you described actually in a recent post about the Eiffel Tower. Yes, I did read that. The Eiffel Tower theory, where the entities on the bottom, they don't know much more than you or I. And for whatever reason, they're denied that knowledge to move on, or they didn't want to move on, or maybe they're afraid to move on. They see that lake, they don't want to go for whatever reason. We're still trying to find these answers because, as I've said, even in the book, we're denied so many key questions whenever we ask them in the field to these entities, they won't answer.
You know what's funny is I didn't post the Eiffel Tower. I don't remember who did, but it might have been
Ah,
Jurgen. But Jurgen and I think a lot alike in many areas.
mm-hmm,
I think that's perfectly fine anyway. Uh, so I think that really is the best hypothesis to date about
mm-hmm,
these negative entities because we do design our own destinies. And if we
mm-hmm,
choose to believe that we have to be under the ground, then we may end up under the ground for as long as we cling to that belief.
mm-hmm,
And you can only imagine this must be a huge problem for the guides, the people who live on that side, who are actively trying to help people leave that negative condition and join them when
mm-hmm.
they just refuse to let go of like that religious belief. So,
Yep,
especially when you go back, in time a little bit to, I mean, obviously fundamentalist religion is still very, very influential, but in the 1800s, 1700s, I mean, that was the major belief system. So you can imagine there must be many people who are just waiting for Jesus to come back. They're just
absolutely.
going to stay under the ground until then, huh?
And this is actually a pretty groundbreaking hypothesis. I mean, I haven't heard anybody else come up with this. But my evidence bears this out because we were trying to think for the longest time, why are these older cemeteries more active than the newer ones? And why is it almost every time we walk in, our equipment lights up? And it wasn't even me who came up with this. Kirsten Klang, who's a paranormal researcher out in Minnesota, she came up with it, and it bowled me over because it was like the light went on, like, oh my gosh, that's it, that's the answer in my mind anyway. And then when I ran it past you, when you said it was plausible, I said, oh, it's going in the book because I can't think of anything else better.
And I also think it's great because it helps to remove a little bit of the fear and superstition surrounding the subject because you'll still have many people who think that when they die, something really bad will happen to them. They might be stuck in some earthbound condition, and all this kind of hocus pocus spooky stuff that people get from TV shows and horror films. And it's good to remove some of those
Hmm.
mythologies because it causes a lot of fear and anxiety for people. And in my research and in my experience, it's amazing just how much we stay the same from the moment we are on this plane to the moment that we are dead on this plane. And this reinforces that because somebody in a religious mindset chooses to stay under the ground. I I speak to my mom on the astral side fairly frequently, and last week or a couple weeks ago she told me that I did a little a quick Q&A to post on the group, and she said the most difficult thing for her upon her passing away here has been just wrapping her mind around where she is and what's happened. She said it's perfectly
Hmm.
fine where she is, and she's perfectly happy with the environment. And she said that there's nothing about it that is off-putting or wrong.
Mm.
But she said it's just crazy to think about that she used to be here and now she's there. That there was an afterlife. That she can't even comprehend that even now living there, hanging out there, working a job there, and having a life there, it's difficult for her when she thinks about it. So I think that's telling as well, just based on my own experiences. I don't know if you have.
Well, believe it or not, my experience dovetails with that. I haven't had that personal interaction you're speaking of, but it was an experience of a message that was relayed to me through my departed father who died in 1983 that actually started me on this entire journey. You know, he related a message to me through my sister-in-law, who was 5 states away at the time. She sat for a reading with a psychic named Sylvia Rossi, and she said, right in the middle of the reading, she stopped. She said, "I have a message for Bobby." And my sister-in-law goes, "My brother-in-law?" She goes, "Yes." She couldn't have known my name, and it was my father who needed to get a message to me about a question that was plaguing me since he died. He answered the question that no one knew except for me. It's a plaguing question. It was amazing. Nobody could have known it. He answered the question, and it was almost like your mom. He was on the other side. He was happy. He said he was young again. He was building houses because he was a carpenter by trade. So it was amazing the similarities to this plane of existence. But he had moved on. He had answered my burning question, and he just wanted to let me know he was okay. And it was just absolutely mind blowing. So I totally agree.
Yeah, and so there's always that consistency with how people describe that side. And you never hear people say, "Oh, I mean, life is great. I just float around all day in space, just a
Right.
disembodied spirit." So on that note, some of the issues that I have with even though I love ghost hunting because I think it's fun, but my issues with it have involved that community of fear, that having ignorance about what the afterlife is really like. But I also have had some issues with misconceptions about EVP. You don't have to be in a cemetery to get great EVPs. You can do it by yourself in your bedroom and communicating to a deceased loved one. Because I know many people who do this and have even been able to carry on relationships with their deceased loved ones. So when we do EVP in a haunted house, EVP in a cemetery, basically we're opening that connection up kind of to random people as opposed to using it as a tool to communicate with our deceased loved ones. Do you have any thoughts about EVP and on those terms, about using it beyond just ghost hunting?
I haven't really used it in that regard. I do have my own personal reasons for not wanting to do it in my home, and even for not wanting to try to connect with my loved ones that way. And the reason is this: there are people that have certain talents, and you would be one of them. That you're talking to your mother. I don't necessarily know I'd be talking to my dad. So I know there are earthbounds out there, and they will come through as EVP, and they may I don't know for sure, but they may pose as a loved one, and I don't want to make that mistake because I don't want to get false communication that way. If I'm almost third party and I'm communicating with an entity in a cemetery, I know that. That's almost third party information, and I could get the answers that I'm looking for without getting personal, if you will. So that's why I don't do it. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I just and I also when I I don't want to do any paranormal investigation in my house because I don't want to attract any earthbounds into my home because sometimes they can be tough to get rid of. So for those reasons, I don't do that. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think people with certain talents, I think it's better. It's if you're a medium, if you're a psychic, if you can astral project, if you can communicate more readily, then I think it's more appropriate.
That is actually a really good point, and it's something that I think people should be more aware of. Sometimes I hear people in the afterlife community complain about the ghost hunting community because it's all based about, they almost feel like it's more on entertainment purposes, going out with a recorder and picking up
Hmm.
ghosts, going, ooh, scary. But
And in many cases, that may be true.
yeah, and that does, a lot of people do it for entertainment, and that I think could also be an issue. But I think that sometimes the people in the afterlife community need to also learn from the ghost hunting community a little bit, because I know through my own research it is possible to get fooled by earthbounds into thinking you're communicating with your deceased loved ones for whatever reason they
Hmm.
do that. Now, certainly that's not the case all the time. I know people
Sure.
who are definitely communicating with their deceased loved ones, specifically using EVP. But I think somebody coming into it a bit haphazardly, they could end up, and I've heard about situations where it's like they think they're talking to their father, and they're doing it for like a few days, and then their dad starts saying like really mean, horrible stuff that he would never say. The whole thing was a sociopathic manipulation attempt.
Hmm.
So I think that the best way around that is you need to be sure of who they are on multiple levels, through mediumship, through your own mediumship, through your own, like you said, projection experiences, whatever it is, to verify, or if you have empathic abilities. But it doesn't mean you should. I mean, I still think people should try EVP as a way to communicate, but it's just something to be mindful of. Keely, I saw your hand raised. We'll open it up to the audience here in like just a few minutes. Um, Bobby, so I'm sorry, somebody was just talking. Yeah, we'll open it up to the audience here in a few minutes. Bobby, so tell us then a little bit more about your show, how long it's been going on, what kind of stuff you guys are up to lately, and what kind of
Hmm.
stuff might be coming up around the corner.
We started back in 2011, and I personally was doing paranormal investigation in the late 80s and early 90s before the term paranormal investigator was even coined. Some friends and I got together to investigate a haunted theater that was built by my great uncle, and we wanted to see if the reported hauntings were true that were happening there. A lot of poltergeist activity, and basically we were winging it. We were using a lot of our own methods and maybe things that we thought, believe it or not, we were using an analog recorder back then, so we were trying to get EVP before EVP was even popular. And then years later, after I had a family, we were watching some of the paranormal shows on TV. And I turned to my kids, and they had absolutely no idea I had done this years earlier. Turned to them, said, "Hey, kids, Dad used to do that too." And it was like that moment in the movie Spy Kids where they say, "My parents aren't cool enough to be spies," and they immediately, no fear, no hesitation, they wanted to go ghost hunting. And it was then that I realized that every member of my family, three women, two girls and my wife, all had incredible, psychic gifts that I didn't have. And so when we went out into the field, the evidence that we were gathering was just absolutely astounding. So, and I would videotape everything, even from the beginning. So I thought it might be a good idea to share our experiences with everyone else. So, we gave ourselves a name, Gallo Family Ghost Hunters, and we put it on YouTube. Our first couple videos went viral, and I mean tens of thousands of views. And then, as happens with YouTube, many times they pulled our monetization, and for one reason or another, which I'm not going to get into. We went to Daily Motion. They picked us right up, gave us a personal assistant, and we were doing great with them. And then just very recently, they instituted a new rule that UFOs and paranormal subjects are now sensitive subjects and are um, no longer eligible for monetization. So we left that. We went on to Vimeo, which is where we are right now, running our own commercials and things like that. But I wanted to basically recount all of the experiences we had early on in our investigations, which is why I wrote the book Family Spirits, because we had so many incredible pieces of evidence, so many experiences that I wanted to share it with everyone because we really do have a different perspective. We do try to bridge the gap between the afterlife community and the paranormal investigative community because I think there's a lot both sides could learn from each other that haven't up to this point, and we have always used experiences and techniques from both angles.
Yeah, that burns me up about YouTube and Dailymotion. Now, isn't
Hmm.
it funny that they put UFOs in that category when we have
Yes.
UFOs being confirmed at this point by like the U.S. Navy, and suddenly it's all over the place everywhere, and still they're going to cling to these old beliefs that these subjects need to be cast
Hmm.
out of the village.
Yep.
Oh man, I wonder how long it is until Afterlife Topics Metaphysics gets our monetization yanked. I mean, it's a miracle we even got monetized, and I just think I think it's just a timer ticking down until they kick us off.
I hope not.
Um, so real quick, I wanted to ask you: do you think mediumship or psychic abilities plays a role in ghost hunting?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, James von Prague, in his book Ghosts Among Us, he talks a lot about the marriage of the two. He has a whole section on paranormal investigation and ghost hunting. So it's really amazing how much it can dovetail if you let it, if you're open to it. I know there's a lot of paranormal investigative teams out there that actually include a medium. Some don't like to do that. Fiona Broom, who did the foreword to our book, who I absolutely adore her. She's just wonderful. Very well respected in the paranormal community, but she's actually a psychic herself. So, absolutely, I think they have a lot to offer. I think they can get answers where our scientific equipment cannot. I know my wife, when she was using the rods, sh those rods were so accurate that I trusted them more than my most advanced equipment. And I've never seen anybody work the rods like her. And I've had like some of the top experts in the field examine our videos, and they watched her hands. She doesn't move a muscle. She can make those things react on command, and she's gotten some incredible communication.
Nice. So with that, I think we're just about at the mark when we'll see if anybody from who's watching from the audience, any patrons of Afterlife Topics who want to ask any questions. So you are watching Afterlife Topics Metaphysics, where we have guests like Bobby on, and we can talk about these kinds of things. It does depend on support from viewers like you. If you want to become a patron and join these conversations, you can sign up at patreon.com/afterlife topics. Keeps people like me doing what we're doing and still being able to do things like eat cheesecake in coffee shops, because apparently you got to pay money in the physical plane to stay alive. It really sucks. So you can sign up down below if you want. And let's take a quick look at some of Bobby's work on his internet ghost hunting show. So let's take a quick look right now.
Now, one other thing we're going to do is we're going to actually verify it with the Ghost Meter Pro. We're going to use it in regular EMF mode, and I have to tell you folks, as far as a regular EMF meter goes, this is one of the best on the market. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave this off till this finds something, then we're going to verify it with this. So here we go. We're going to enter the gates of the Old Unity Cemetery right now. Now, so far, folks, we're not getting anything, but we've just entered. And we're actually going to go over to a spot that we know has paranormal activity. And also, just to let you folks know that we do have reason to believe from a medium that there actually may even be a spiritual vortex in this cemetery, so this could be Ghost Central. Actually going to go over to this series of graves over here. Now this is actually interesting, folks, because the audio just stopped. The ghostometer is actually pinging higher now, but now there's no audio, and it's lit up. It's lit up now, so apparently, according to the ghostometer, it has found something. But once again, I'm not getting anything on the Ghost Meter Pro on regular EMF mode. Whoa! Whoa! The ghostometer just went off the scale. In fact, this thing vibrated in my hand. And we got something. Oh, it's sensing something big time. Now, we went through the entire cemetery. We did our tests. We really didn't get as much as we wanted to get, but we did have our digital recorder going the entire time. When we got home, Renee and I, we actually loaded everything up on the computer. What we caught are actually two of the clearest EVPs we have ever gotten. They are going to blow you away. So what we're going to do, let me give you a little preface. We actually had shut off the video camera at this time, and we were walking back to the car, and we were just talking. The digital recorder was on the entire time. Now, I'm going to play the first one to you, and what Renee's going to do now, because she's on camera, is she's going to pan over to the computer screen, and we cut the two EVP clips out, and we're going to play the first one for you. And this was just as we were walking back to the car. And let's see if you can hear exactly what it says.
I don't want to step on anybody.
Let's try that again.
I don't want to step on anybody.
Let's try that one more time.
I don't want to step on anybody.
Now what we're going to do is we're actually going to amplify this so that you can hear it again.
I don't want to step on anybody.
That is a clear EVP saying, come back. We were going to the car, we were leaving for the day, and an entity, EVP, is saying, come back. Listen to it again. 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 Unbelievable. Now, we're going to go to the next one. We weren't out of the cemetery yet, and yet we captured another EVP. It's a female voice. The same entity follows up with another EVP. It's unbelievable, folks. I never had two in a row like this. Listen. Did you hear that? Listen to it again. 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 The first one says, come back. The second one says, don't leave now. Same voice, two EVPs, completely related messages in a row. So let's play them back to back.
I don't want to step on anybody.
And here's the second, moments later.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for Bobby?
Yeah, I got one.
Corey.
So, Bobby, how has your experience as a magician, how has that helped you with this second career, if you will?
That's a really good question. As many people may know, Harry Houdini made a large part of his career out of debunking fraudulent spiritualists, in the Victorian era. And basically because of that, many magicians throughout history thought it was their job to debunk anything paranormal related. I came from a completely different angle. I wanted to use my abilities as a magician to see if the evidence that was being captured on these paranormal TV shows was genuine or fraudulent. That's the reason that's another reason I went into this. The whole revelation from my father was one reason, but another reason was, as a magician, I wanted to see if these guys were faking all of this stuff. So when I went out in the field and I duplicated what they were doing, which is what magicians do, we try to duplicate to see if we can get the same evidence. I was duplicating it and I was getting the evidence. However, bing, 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 this evidence wasn't fake. This evidence was real. So I used my abilities as a magician for the complete opposite of what traditionally people become magicians for, just to debunk and say, there's no such thing as an afterlife, and when we die, we're dead, and thank you, Houdini.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great, Corey. Thanks for asking that, because it's great to have a magician, a former magician, here talking to us, because I've only known a couple of magicians who got into the para subjects on a positive level. I've certainly known mentalists and magicians alike who have adopted a very cynical attitude to everything, which is a shame, because I think they can't see the forest through the trees. Do we have anybody else? Keely, I saw your hand raised during the interview. Did you have anything you wanted to ask?
We're talking about not doing things in like your home or whatnot, and I just wondered if you or anyone else had any I guess advice on how not to get earthbound spirits in your home, or what to do to so that doesn't happen, I guess, besides not doing it in your house.
Okay, no, fair enough.
Does that make sense?
No,
Yeah.
completely makes sense. Okay, let me take. You said besides not doing it in your house. When we're doing an investigation, I have a couple rules, and one rule is not to do it in your house. The other one is not to take anything home from an investigation. Don't take a rock from a cemetery, even if it's a cool looking rock. Don't take anything. Don't take anything. Try to be third person when you are investigating. The reason is in our experience, there can be spiritual attachments to objects, and when you take them home, it's like the hitchhiking ghosts in the Haunted Mansion in Disney World. You're just giving them a ride in the back seat of your car. Don't do that. Also, even I came across a haunted teddy bear in a very old cemetery. It's actually Mystery at Blackstock Cemetery. It's one of our episodes. I wouldn't even touch this thing. The energy that was coming, the EMF energy that was radiating off of this old stuffed teddy bear on this grave was so intense that I knew that if I even disturbed this thing, I was asking for trouble. So you don't want to do that. Also, here is probably the biggest thing. Intent is everything. See, we call this psychic phenomenon for a reason, because a lot of it happens in the mind. And like I said, mind, spirit, soul, ghost, it's all the same thing, okay? So your thoughts and your intent can be very powerful things to the spirit world. So keep it clean, keep it respectful, and when you're done with an investigation, literally say out loud, I'm going home, you're staying here, and mean it, okay? Because believe it or not, that works. If you do get something to follow you home, sage, I have some wards that I use that I talk about in family spirits. I am Roman Catholic, so I do use a medal of Saint Benedict, which is called the devil chasing medal, and has been for hundreds and hundreds of years. It works for me. People from different spiritual understandings may have different ways of doing it, so it's always good to give that a lot of thought. But remember, don't do it at home. When you're on an investigation, don't take anything home. Try not to touch anything that looks suspicious, and have some kind of something that you could do for protection in your house.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wondered because it's not that I want to do it at my house, but sometimes there's things that happen in the house that I want to know what's going on. My mom was an antique collector, and
Oh my
sometimes
gosh.
I'll just bring things into the house and I'll know, like, oh my gosh, that's not great. Or my son, he will like see and talk to spirits a lot, and he'll kind of tell me what's going on. But he's 13 now, so he's a little bit quieter, and so sometimes I want to know what is going on. But
you would not believe the amazing amount of objects that hold an EMF charge in an antique store. I'm not kidding. Get an EMF detector, a K2, they're cheap, you can get one for $20-$30. Go into an antique shop and start taking readings on objects, and you will be amazed at how many of them have energy that they shouldn't have. There shouldn't be an EMF charge to anything made of wood, but yet sometimes there are. Why? I mean, we don't know. And you know what? There are such a thing as haunted objects, and you can actually check them out. I had to get rid of a pair of dowsing rods because after using them for so many years, they had such a high EMF charge, you would get a shock just by touching them. I had to get rid of them because they were bringing things into my house. So yes, I mean, I totally understand what you're saying, and from experience, it's really amazing.
our family home, I mean, some rooms you still don't want to go into. I mean, she had this doll room. No, nobody wants to go into that room.
Yeah,
But,
do you have any animals, by the way?
yeah, a cat. And the cat, yeah.
You see, well, cats are good. That's why I
Mhm.
asked, because a lot of times if you have a cat, they can keep the negative energies away, which is why I asked. But you said the cat doesn't even want to go in the room.
If no, not that house. No, no, no.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
the one my house, I'll know because if I bring
Huh.
something in, things will change. But our family home, no, that's a different story. I mean, it's a big house. It has a lot of rooms, and there's just some rooms you don't want to go into. And there's a lot of stuff there that
Mm.
needs to be gone. I mean,
And maybe that is your answer. Just start checking things, and if something gives you a real negative vibe, when you pick it up, hold it. Maybe you should take it out of the house and see if things improve.
yeah, yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there a there's a clairaudience, clairsentient. Is there a clair that has to do with holding objects? Because I think some people, if they hold an object, they can get information out of it. So that object has some sort of information attached to it. You know.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, and this information, this energy that is attached to these objects, is it residual? Is it intelligent? Um, I don't know. Does this dovetail with afterlife and metaphysics, where maybe a consciousness wants to be attached to this? I mean, I've just heard so many of these stories and even had my own experiences that I can't help to think, but that in some cases, yes. But I like I said, I'm no expert. I can only tell you that it's happened to me and other people.
Bobby, so do you know anything about what it is that would cause an object to become haunted, or what
Hmm?
the sort of process is behind that? Is it literally the deceased person, or is it some residual thing? Or I find that whole subject confusing.
It is confusing and it's very murky, and I totally agree with that. This is what I know. A lot of it has to do with electromagnetic energy. And electromagnetism is a part of us. We have our own electromagnetic fields. And in religious traditions, they called it the halo, they call it the aura, and a lot of New Age traditions, not traditions, but fields, if you will, the chakra. There's a lot of different names for the same thing. It's that energy that we have. And I know this for certain, that when we go out and we communicate, whatever is communicating with us feeds off of this electromagnetic energy. They drain our equipment constantly, which is why now we use EMF pumps to keep them from draining our equipment. We will put one out literally and let it go, just so that they don't drain the batteries on our camcorders, which has happened so often. And also, that's why we can detect them with EMF detectors. And a lot of times, if they don't have anything else to take energy from, they will take it from us, which is why a lot of times we get lethargic after an investigation, and we actually call it paranormal hangover. So we know it's electromagnetic energy based, and a lot of these objects that we come across that are supposedly haunted, more times than not, have an electromagnetic charge. We have some very sensitive. I use a tri-field. It's the most sensitive EMF detector you can buy, and you can see it. You can see it on these objects, and a lot of them.
That's really interesting you say that.
Yeah.
What that gives my mind, what I'm thinking right now is the difference between hot and cold. How everything wants to equalize, and you have this negative energy, and you are positive energy, and it's trying to suck that positive energy out of you. Trying to equalize it. That's interesting.
Mhm.
Interesting concept, I think.
Well, it's a concept that's born in evidence. I can't say fact or proof because we don't have any of that yet, but we do have the evidence, and there is a quantitative difference between evidence and proof. The evidence shows that there is a link. There is some kind of a link between our life force and electromagnetic energy, which is, again, Cyrus, you were talking about this before. A lot of these ancient legends having a basis in fact. Ghosts appearing during thunderstorms. Well, what happens during a thunderstorm? The air is ionized. So there may be a basis in fact in that during lightning storms, we have more paranormal activity. So, I mean, this stuff is coming together slowly, but it is coming together.
Keely, I saw your hand was raised.
Yeah, I was just going to ask when we were talking about, sorry, when we were talking about YouTube and whatnot, where can we find you now? Where did you say you are now?
We are on Vimeo, and
Oh,
if you,
Vimeo.
yep, Vimeo. So you could get there one of two ways. You could just go there through your Roku box or Amazon Fire Stick to the Vimeo channel and find us, or you can go straight to www.ghosthunter.ws. That's
Okay,
ghosthunter.ws, and you can, that's how you can get there through the web.
okay, thank you.
There's a
Yeah,
few,
that's
there's a few episodes. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, some episodes are better than others because this is all real. We're not doing this for entertainment. This is all genuine. So some of them are going to be great. Some of them are going to be like yawners, but I put everything up because I want everybody to see everything.
Yeah, that's good. The whole scope of things, like what we were talking about when Cyrus was gone, and we're talking about, consistency with mediums and how whatever. I think, at least you're able to see, okay, so some places are not haunted or nothing is going on, instead of just making something up and having something happen,
No,
to have
no,
yeah. That's
we don't
pretty
do that at all. And if you have a pen and paper handy, The Hidden Grave of Thomas Sprott, watch that episode.
okay. All right.
Because a lot of people say, if you could just give me one episode to watch, that's the one. Because you'll see a full body apparition, and you'll see me not able to enter a cemetery gate in the middle of the woods with an EMF detector literally jumping out of my hand. And it's just, that episode has a little bit of everything. It was one of our most active investigations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Real quick, Bobby, I wanted to comment on the clip that I showed earlier, which was your best EVP. So it's like, it almost sounded to me, and if I were like a skeptic, I might criticize it because it sounded too much like a spirit sounding like a spirit, like come here. She was saying, don't go, or what was the exact phrase again?
Come back, and then a couple seconds later, don't leave now.
Right. And so in that clip, it sounded like it was a spirit trying to sound a little bit spooky, right?
You're
So
right. It does sound exactly that way.
yeah, it sounds like a ghost playing the role of a ghost. Right?
I completely agree with you. And it is what it is. That's what happened. That's what came through. And I find more times than not, that is how they sound. They sound very close to the microphone, very wispy and ethereal. And I believe that it's because, look, when they're transcending from one plane of existence to another, and they're doing it through a certain medium, and we know the frequency that they're talking on. It's the same frequency as a dog whistle, which is why we can't hear it, but the digital recorders can pick it up. They come through sounding that way. And that's another thing. If I were to be falsifying this, I would be doing it on the same frequency as we're talking now. It's on a completely different frequency that we can't even duplicate, so to speak.
And I also think that it may be that somebody on that side knows our pop culture, and
It could be.
I want to be a creepy ghost. Ooh, don't go, come to me. They want to actually sound like it because somewhere like mythology and pop culture begins to come full circle and become factual when people on that side are actually hearing that and then taking on those roles, right?
All I could say to your listeners, to you, to your listeners, to everybody, on my honor, that EVP is 100% legit. And I know it doesn't sound legit, but it is. And that's what happened. That's what we caught. And that's why I say it's the greatest EVP I've ever heard, because I can't believe I caught it. It was completely caught by accident.
So I'll toss you kind of I was going to say hardball, but not really. I just want to know about if you're familiar with some of the EVP researchers of yore, like Konstantin Rodiv, who allegedly created the acronym EVP, or are you familiar with any of the modern researchers who do EVP, ITC in controlled conditions, like Sonia Rinaldi, for example?
Honestly, I don't. And the reason I don't is not because I'm trying to be, an amateur or anything like that, but it's the way I've developed my methodology is because I didn't want to listen to anybody else. And that's why I don't even watch the ghost hunting shows. Other than what I watched in the very beginning, I don't watch them. I don't want to be influenced by them. And again, going back to Fiona Broom, who did the foreword for our book, she said it was such a fresh perspective on paranormal investigation because it wasn't like anybody else. And everything rang true to her because she saw that what we were doing was blazing our own trail, which is why I haven't followed a lot of these people. I'm just glad that I get a lot of the same evidence.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I don't know if you've ever gone to ITC areas. We had an ITC guy, Keith Clark, a few episodes back, but these experiments have to be done in kind of controlled conditions. And in the very best examples, like with Rinaldi, it reminds me of like what you were saying. It's like this is really unbelievable and wild, and it's easy for a skeptic to throw stones at it because it's too good, right? It's so weird because
Mm-hmm.
skeptics, they want something that's really, really good, but then if it's too good, then it's too good, and then they'll throw stones. If it's not good
Of
enough,
course.
they'll say it's not good enough. So so they want this perfect Goldilocks area of evidence, which they'll never find. So, but right, like with Rinaldi, who's going to be on the show in a couple weeks, she produces images that it's straight up spirit people like waving at the camera, hello, and it's too much for some people to comprehend. But she's
Mm-hmm.
been doing it for 30 years and doesn't make any money off of it. So it's just when you meet her, she's a great woman. It's absurd to think of her falsifying these images, and they're identifiable of people sometimes looking 20 years younger, 30 years younger than when they passed away. And it's not like something you have to interpret. It's literally an image of somebody like looking at a camera, and then the spirit side has told her that they literally have a building with a camera. They sit on a couch and then they take video and they beam it to her equipment. But that's the thing is, I think some of these areas, like, it's almost, you reach a point when if the evidence just gets too good and people just shut down, and it's like
Right.
you're at a point where you can't even you can't go past that because because now we've hit like a paradigm wall in society. Now it's no longer even about the person, it's about the society. You have any
Well,
thoughts?
oh, absolutely. Keep in mind when it comes to skeptics, a lot of these people are suffering from phasmophobia, and they are absolutely uh, they're so opposed to the existence of spirits and ghosts that they're never going to accept this evidence. And I've run into that. I actually ran into a skeptic one time that was fighting me tooth and nail, and every piece of evidence I would throw at him, he wouldn't accept. And he finally admitted to me. He fessed up and he says, I'm terrified of the existence of an afterlife. I don't want to go on after this. The thought of becoming a spirit to me is absolutely terrifying. And then it hit me. I said, this guy's got phasmophobia. He doesn't, the reason he is a skeptic is because he doesn't want to believe. And when somebody doesn't want to believe, no matter what you show them, they're not going to believe. And they're going to frame it in a scientific uh, frame, if you will, because they want to show everybody, oh, I'm being scientific and I'm going to debunk all of this, when in reality they just don't want to
Right, and there's probably layers of reasons why that is on a belief system scale. I mean, it could be they're scared because of things they've done in their life. They're afraid of retribution,
judgment.
judgment. They are afraid of, maybe because of religious upbringing, they are scared that some religious angle might be correct or hell might be real. Or
Exactly, I agree with that.
the thing is I think it ties a little bit into, well, it might tie a little bit into the negative side of ghost hunting that I was talking about at the beginning of this interview, where you have ghost hunting as this sort of ratings grabber entertainment thing where people don't
Hmm.
introduce real metaphysical subjects into it, and they just leave viewers thinking, well, when you cross over, you become this phantasm floating around. And it's very easy for me to imagine this scaring people, because I think it did for me when I was a kid, right? Watching some of these shows on cable, and that without having afterlife knowledge, thinking, oh my God, this is what could happen to us all when we die. We become these, we become these phantasms, and that's almost like it's feeding into the skeptics.
I agree. I agree, and I think that is one of the biggest causes of phasmophobia. And I'm running into more and more people that are afflicted with this, and I think, but they should be honest about it. Don't try to debunk to make yourself feel better. Just if you don't want to believe it, just get out of the area, but don't call yourself a paranormal researcher.
And it goes deep. You have people who have claimed to be paranormal researchers their own lives. I'm thinking of people like, well, I guess we could Susan Blackmore, who has spent most of her life trying to debunk near-death experiences, and you wonder, like, what bone does she have to pick with near-death experiences? Because she had an out-of-body experience once, and she said it was an hallucination, and that sent her on this warpath of trying to debunk everything that's paranormal. But there's a lot of complex psychological mechanisms behind the hardcore skeptic mentality, because I don't think it's not aligned to objective reality, because even
Correct.
people without any interest in these subjects have ghost experiences. And I'll kind of cap things off here with a quick story, and then I can get your feedback, Bobby, and tell me if you've ever heard anything like this. When I was
Sure.
growing up, I had a friend who half his family was from Mexico, and so he also lived in Arizona with me, but then like half the year he'd go back to Mexico. And he told me he was terrified. And we're both like, I'm like 12 years old. He's like 15. He said he was terrified of ever going back to Mexico because he remembered when he was little, like 3 years old, he was still in a crib, and they put him in the crib. And so he'd be sleeping in his crib. And he said that one of the dolls in the room with him would come to life and like crawl across the floor, and like its little doll finger would rise up, little doll hand, and then poke him in the ribs between the bars of the little plastic bars. So that always terrified me as well, because he was so convinced that this would happen to him. Ever hear about any animated possessed artifacts like that?
That's a little extreme in my opinion, but I will say anything that had to do with haunted objects or things of that nature, they were never really animated. In fact, any kind of poltergeist activity and even visually seeing apparitions is really kind of rare. It's more what they're carrying along with them. In our experience, any objects that were actually haunted will actually give you more of an oppressed feeling, negative energy, things of that nature. But actual animation, like the little Chucky doll, running across the room, I've never really had any experience with anything like that, nor have I really heard of anything like that. My experiences pretty much are congruent with all of the other paranormal investigators that I know. We have very much the same experiences with haunted objects, that they will bring something into your house, but nothing that's going to be like, next horror movie or anything like that.
Right. So this stuff about Annabelle and all, and the Hollywood perspective, it seems pretty badly exaggerated, huh?
Absolutely. Well, Annabelle is based on a real doll, which exists, and whether or not that's actually haunted is out, is still out there. However, it's not what the movie is making it out to be. It was a completely different type of situation. It was more the type of situation that I was just speaking about, where it has more of an oppressive energy than actually anything that's animated.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I'll throw this out there now, coming from somebody who's from that time has spent 20 years researching the subject. My hypothesis why somebody would come with a story about like a doll coming to life and poking you is actually that way that could happen is if there is a earthbound, or if there is an energy attached to something, it could create a dream that seems very real just because it wants to scare you.
I love that.
It wants to create something negative, and so you could be fooled into thinking it's coming to life, but really you're having like a lucid dream, or like a semi-astral experience where you are confronting the manifestation of its energy on that side. and then that might be a negative experience.
No, I think that's that.
What you said is that every time we've had these conversations about a story like that, I always listen for the point when they say that it's at night, or they're in a bedroom, or in this case, in a crib where you're supposed to be sleeping. And I always just remember, you can have these astral dreams that seem so real in your own bedroom, in your own crib, and that's usually where my mind goes. That's where it takes it. They had some sort of astral experience, out-of-body experience, and they just didn't realize it.
I agree with both of you. I think that's the most plausible explanation for something like that I've heard so far.
I have a story about the doll room. Actually, what I do, one of the kids actually, and my sister and my kid, one of my children, have had the exact same experience. Now, whether they were dreaming or whatever, my sister thought that the dolls grabbed her out of bed and carried her across the floor. She woke up, she screamed, tried to get up and run out of the room, and the door was closed. She hit the door and it knocked her out. And my dad ran up the stairs. There was dolls out that were in boxes. So he remembers that. And my son, he refused to go in the room after he was supposed to be sleeping in there. And he said the dolls woke him up and tried to carry him across the room. And they both said the same thing. So I don't know, what happened, but nobody likes that room. So I don't know if
I might be wrong. It may be possible that dolls really can't come to life and crawl around and attack you. So don't take my word for it. I'm just here.
Well, I doubt that, but I don't. It's interesting that they both had the same experience, and they're both terrified of the room. So
I don't have any. Yeah, I don't have anything for you on this. I really don't.
If I ever have kids, I'm going to create these great night lights for the kids. You just take a doll head and then stick a light in it, and then plug it in and turn all the lights off. You just have a glowing head with a light coming up its eyes. It's really cute little lamp you can make for your kids. They'll really appreciate you for it.
Yeah, right. Scare the hell out of them.
All right. So on the topic of possessed dolls, I guess we're just about finished here. Bobby, any final things you want to mention, or anything new, any new projects, or anything you want to let people here at Afterlife Topics know about?
Well, right now we are still in the process of finishing up our Vimeo channel. We have about 45 of our 60 episodes remastered and uploaded. So we definitely ghosthunter.ws is the website channel, and also I'd like to tell them where they can get the book if they're interested in getting a copy of Family Spirits, 260 pages. It's a great book, a lot of meat to it, and that's at FamilySpiritsBook.com.
Cool, great, Bobby. Hope to have you back or chat more in the future. I think it's great to have a ghost hunting expert / magician to talk to, who's also really educated in the complex nitty gritty of metaphysical subjects. So it's great to have you here. And I guess that's it for this episode. So if you've actually watching all the way until the end, thanks for being a good sport and not doing what I just closing the window 3 minutes before the video ends, no matter what. So you're obviously, a great sport for staying on. So the final message is, please subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Hit that notification bell. Get involved over at Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. And the next video will be, I'll still be here in Kiev, Ukraine for the next couple of months to take this really difficult class out here. I'm kind of burning the candle at both ends out here, but I'm pulling it off, and so I'll have more content, more videos, more guests coming up. Like I said, we have Sonia Rinaldi on November 3rd. We have Frank Huber. We have Kensho, the out-of-body experience, advanced out-of-body experience guy, coming in to talk about parallel dimensions and crazy stuff like that. So it should be fun. Thanks, everybody, for coming out tonight. And I will go ahead and end the meeting, but I will leave the chat open in case anybody wants to talk afterwards. The room will still be active. I'm going to go ahead and get out of this coffee shop. So see you guys.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.